A little bit about Dennis. He's a filmmaker, author of several books, is recognized as an authority on spiritual experience, self-discovery, and exploring the human consciousness, with over 24 books published on topics ranging from Zen, Tao, and Buddhism, to a series of books on the mythology of the Tlingit people of southeastern Alaska. His books are used throughout the world in universities as reference and teaching tools. How about that? As a speaker, his teachings invoke an introspective view on how to discover one's true, authentic self. Dennis Waller.
All right. Thank you for coming out. I'm humbled that y'all willing to take the time to hear what I have to say. So thank you for that. The topic that we're going to discuss is the origins of evil. Now, what led me to this topic is my work with the Tlingit Indians of southeastern Alaska in dealing with their mythology. And one of the aspects of their mythology is a mythical shape-shifting creature called the Kustaka. The more I studied the Kustaka, the more I started to see parallels of the Kustaka to other things like Greek mythology and ancient biblical texts. And this thread led me back to the Bible, to the beginning of man in Genesis. The origins of evil, I'm going to hit on 3 points. One, it's necessary for our existence. Second, this earth is under the devil's domain. And thirdly, there is a UFO connection to biblical texts. I want to show our suspects and how they're going to connect. First, I have Isaac Newton. He's the one that said for every action, there has to be an equal reaction. Next, I have Fred Allen Wolf. Most of you know him from down the rabbit hole, What the Bleep Do We Know? He said that laws of physics that Newton discovered not only apply to the three-dimensional realm, but it applies to the spiritual realm as well. For every action, there must be an equal reaction. So in Fred Allen Wolf's mind, the reason evil exists is to counter the good that we have in this world. Next, we have the Book of Jubilees, which I'll get to. Next, I have the Book of Enoch. Then I have Emanuel Swedenborg, who in 1758 published a book called Heaven and Hell, where he talked about the hierarchy of the heavens. Next, I have Dr. John Dee, along with Edward Kelly during the 1500s, was able to put together a system of communication with the angels, the Anconian language, which again, he exposed a very structured hierarchy of angels. Next, we have Dr. John Mack with Harvard University, who did some research into the abduction stories, and his results were contradicting what we had thought, and we'll get to that next. The movie John Carter, done by Disney, based on the movie by Edgar Rice Burroughs, Princess of Mars. And then next we have the movie Prophecy, starring Christopher Walken. Then we go to Zeus of Greek mythology. Then we have, of course, my book, The Kustaka. Next, we're going to talk about Fritz Zimmerman's book, The Nephilim Chronicles. Then Scott Allen Roberts' book, where he talks about the similarities between Greek mythology and the Bible. So, Devil's Domain. I theorize that this whole entire planet is under the domain of the devil. The first fall of the angels was Lucifer when he fell here with 1/3 of heaven. He set this up as home. Theory number 1, Garden of Eden. God created a compound with gates, with guards, but yet Satan was able to infiltrate that compound and corrupt Adam and Eve. My question is, if God was in control of this planet, how did Satan ever get that far into this? And I say it's because it's Satan's domain. Yes, there is a semblance of equality between the two, but God is still superior to Satan. And a crass analogy would put, you might live in a house that you make mortgage payments on. The bank might own your house, but you're the one living in it. Even though the bank owns the mortgage, they just can't walk in your house anytime they want. They have to ask your permission to get in. Second, when we move forward into Devil's Domain, in the Book of Jubilees, after the flood, when Seth was living on top of a mountain. The demons had incorporated a village at the base of this mountain with music, liquor, lewd entertainment. So all the righteous on this mountain were kind of getting tired of just doing nothing, so they would go down to this village and become corrupted. Finally, sin said, God, you got to do something. I mean, you had a flood to wipe them out. Now they're all back. And at the rate we're going, the only one left on top of this mountain is going to be me, and only because I'm too old to get down to the bottom. So God came back to earth, sat down with Satan, and said, I want to remove all of you from this planet. Satan said, you can't do that. This is my domain. So God and Satan sat down and negotiated a contract to where Satan would bind 9/10 of all the demons to purgatory and then would remain in control of this planet. So what we're having is good and evil. And on this planet, there has to be this fine balance, because if one gets above the other one is going to come back and bring it back in. As demonstrated first with the Garden of Eden, when Satan corrupted Adam and Eve, to bring the balance back to the great flood. But the spiritual war isn't just two-sided between Satan and God, between good and evil. We have a third player, and that's where the fallen angels come in. The fallen angels came to heaven in the second fall, and with that done, they interbred with women, created the Nephilim. Their sole purpose in coming to this earth was to do away with God, do away with God's bloodline, the bloodline of Adam, create their own bloodline, kick Satan out of the picture, and just make this domain theirs in its entirety. This again upset the balance between good and evil. And like in the movie Prophecy, where Viggo Mortensen plays the devil, makes the comment, I'm not here because I love you. I'm here because if this guy wins, we'll have two hells, and that's one hell too many. So the enemy of my enemy becomes my friend. So throughout the history of man, we've had this spiritual battle between good and evil. And anytime one gets above the other, something's going to happen to bring it back. Now, Michael Sarian does a really good presentation on origins of evil, where he goes really deep into the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs, and such. I take a different route. My route begins with the Great Flood. When the fallen angels had gotten to a point of superiority, it was impacting God's work and the devil's work. So the Great Flood came to pass. Now, God could not destroy these angels. Rather, he bound their spirits to earth to the end of days. The Nephilim, the hybrids of the fallen angels and earthlings, were also bound to earth as demon spirits or disembodied spirits. Now, if we look back through history, we have encounters of UFOs since the dawn of time. If we look at medieval art, we see illustrations of UFOs. Now, what's interesting about the fallen angels is when they came here, one of their first programs was genetic engineering, because they wanted to find a way to be born into the three-dimensional realm as humans are. And through this genetic engineering is where we come up with the mythical creatures of Greek mythology, the centaurs, minotaurs, and etc. So the UFO phenomena of abductions has been happening for thousands of years. In the Middle Ages, abductions were called the effects of the incubus and the succubus. These are spirits that would come in and have sex either with a man or a woman, and the woman would give birth to this hybrid. What this was a way for the fallen angels to continue their genetic engineering to figure out how to break into our three-dimensional realm as a human. Now, what Dr. John Mack discovered is these abduction stories that people were telling under hypnosis. As a skeptic at first, he became convinced that they were telling the truth. Now, UFOologists do not want the world to know what they discovered. But John Jordan with the CE4 research group studied over 500 abductees. And what they found was a very small percentage that said when they were in the midst of this abduction and they were being probed and tortured and studied in this spaceship or wherever they were, if they crawled out the name of Christ or Jesus, they were instantly put back in their bed, their car, wherever they were. Now, this was very alarming that it wasn't just one story, but it was a series of stories of these abductees. So with this research in hand, Joe Jordan and his group started contacting other research groups that were doing the same study, and they discovered that this was happening. So the question is, how can a UFO little green man have fear of the name of Christ or the name Jesus? Now what's interesting, it isn't about religion, it's about our history. It has nothing to do if you're a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, it has nothing to do with it. This is about our history. So what we study, what we see is there's a very structured hierarchy within an organization that is beyond our sight. And this structured organization has been shown to us through the works of Emanuel Swedenborg and John Dee. So in this structured hierarchy, we see that these different levels of demons have to answer to a superior. That can plainly be seen in the Testament of Solomon, where Solomon actually calls forth to court a series of demons, and each demon says, this is my purpose, this is what I do, this is who I answer to, and this is how I react, and this is what you can do to get me to stop. So what we have is a theory that the extraterrestrials are nothing more than the remnants of the fallen angels who are still trying after thousands of years to find a way to break back into our three-dimensional realm as humans so they can continue to propagate their agenda, which is not only to overtake us as a species, but to kick out the devil, kick out God, and make their own world. Because Jesus is somebody of authority. He's somebody to be reckoned with. And in this Last Supper, we have Jesus giving his last meal. And Marshall had a very good point that what if Jesus, who admitted that he had been reincarnated, was actually at one point the Son of Man, Adam himself, and this is his last meal before his final ascension into the spirit world. So he brought together his friends and family from his previous lives, with Cain being Judas and the other ones being brothers and sisters from his previous life. So if you look at spiritual texts, biblical texts, and you look past the words and start looking for the meanings, it really gives an alarming story. For instance, the Bible is full of black magic. All throughout the Old Testament, there's acts of black magic. For instance, if you were married to a woman and you thought she was unfaithful, you could take her to the priest, and the priest would give her a potion and perform a ritual to see if she had been faithful or not. Had she been unfaithful, she would be in dire consequences. There's other instances of black magic in the Bible. When the old man's going through town and the kids threw stones at him, calling him Baldy, he cursed the kids in the name of God, and 2 bears came out of the woods and promptly made quick dispose of 42 children. So time and time again throughout the Bible, there is a darkness to it. But the darkness is not to be feared, it's to be embraced because it's necessary to maintain this balance. The question is, why is we have to have this balance? Well, you can look at it like this is our school, and the only weapon that we really have in our defense is free will. We have the choice to decide to either resist temptation or fall into it. But the bigger picture here that I want to talk about is just the fact that the UFOs, the little green men, as far as UFO research is showing us that they're really, in fact, not from some other solar system, not from some other planet, that they're from right here, and they're actually the fallen angels. And like I say in the book, if I wanted to prove this theory, then all I have to do is find me a Kustaka and to say, hey, by the way, Christ said you can't mess with me, see what happens. If I come back alive, then we know the theory works. All right, thanks.
Thank you.